Good evening, everyone. I'm Councilmember Chris Ray, and I'm going to call to order the October 8th, 2024 Council Mobility and Infrastructure Committee. With me this evening is Councilmember Zach Hall, and Deputy Council President Barbara D. Michelle has an excused absence. There are multiple public comment opportunities at tonight's meeting. There is a general public comment opportunity at the beginning of the meeting, or you can make comments after the presentation and council question and answer. Members of the public may address the council at this time in person or virtually. Those who signed up first will signed up in advance will be called on first. If you join virtually and would like to make comment, please raise your virtual hand. If you're in the room and did not sign up, I'll ask for speakers before closing this portion of the meeting. City Clerk, has anybody signed up, and is there anybody with us online tonight?
No, Chair.
Okay. Anybody in the room wish to make comments? Okay. As a reminder, written comments can be submitted anytime to citycouncil@issaquah.gov. All right. With that, we have one item on our agenda this evening, and it is COM 0034 Neighborhood Traffic Calming Program, and John Larson Friend is going to be, I had a friend named Jonathan Larson, so I apologize. Will be presenting this evening, and I think I will turn it over to you. Oh, sorry. 1 minute. We have the draft minutes. The first agenda item is approval of the minutes. Is there any objection to approving the minutes from the July 9th, 2024 Mobility and Infrastructure Committee meeting? No, without an objection, the meeting minutes are approved. John, you're up.
Good evening, council members. My name is John Larson Friend, not Jonathan. You can ask my parents about that. And I am the Transportation Program Coordinator. And this evening, I have the pleasure of talking to you both about the Neighborhood Traffic Calming Program. The purpose this evening is to receive feedback on the proposed Neighborhood Traffic Calming Program update. The direction that we're looking for this evening is we are requesting feedback from the Mobility and Infrastructure Committee on the proposed changes to the Neighborhood Traffic Calming Program. And the main question that we're asking is, should the policy move forward for council adoption? So backing up, giving you a high-level look at the changes that we've made, that we're looking to make to this policy. First, establishes key objective statements, adds traffic characteristics that would be assessed beyond the 85th percentile speeds, and improves access to request submittal process and early phases of the program. It introduces and differentiates level 1 and 2 interventions, and alters how the traffic calming plan support is measured. So, backing up even further, I guess. What is traffic calming? Well, very simply, WashDOT's definition includes the following. Traffic calming supports the livability and vitality of residential and commercial areas by improving the safety, mobility, and comfort for all road users, with special care taken for pedestrians and bicyclists. I'm going to give you a little bit of history of this specific policy. So this policy goes all the way back to 2003 when it was adopted. And then in 2018, there was an Old Town traffic calming pilot. Basically, staff put out several different measures in the Old Town area in response to, I think, multiple requests over time. I do want to note that this specific pilot wasn't technically a part of the traffic calming program proper, since it was an action taken by internal staff. In 2019, an update to the traffic calming policy began as a part of the mobility master plan process. And then later in 2019, a consultant was hired. That consultant was basically looked at what changes possibly could be made, and they produced a memo. 2020 happened, as we all know, and the update was pushed to at least 2021. And then in 2021, staff made a presentation to TAB, basically summarizing the memo that was given by the consultant. And I've watched that meeting a few times, and I would characterize the response from TAB as cool. That's basically what they said. So then in fall 2022, I had come aboard that spring, and I took over the traffic calming program. By early 2023, I began work on updating the traffic calming program, not really knowing anything about the history of that I just described. It was more of a, oh, this thing needs help, I should probably update this. And then, of course, I discovered that that work had already started previous. In December of 2023, I gave a TAB reintroduction to the topic, as there had been some turnover of members, naturally. April of this year, we brought basically a structure outline of what we thought a possible traffic calming program could look like, and they gave feedback on that. Based on that feedback, during May and June, we drafted and gave it out for collaborator review. Those collaborators included internal staff and some external-ish stakeholders, collaborators as well, which included school district, Eastside Fire, etc. And then in July of 2024, we brought that draft back to TAB, and they provided comment. So let's take a look at what the existing traffic calming program is. So it is, the title of it is the Neighborhood Traffic Calming Program. It was adopted in 2003, as I mentioned. It addresses local access streets, which is defined as, in the policy, as all roadways that are not principal arterials, minor arterials, or collectors. So that basically just leaves residential streets, and only residential streets. This old policy is broken into two phases. I characterize that first phase as kind of non-physical interventions, if any, and then phase two is more physical. Basically the process starts with a citizen action request form. So when this policy was put into place, the intention was a person would come in, say, hello, I would like, into the city hall or front desk and say, hello, I would like traffic calming on my street. Great, here's your form, and here's a brochure all about the program, and they would submit their request on paper. Based on that request, a traffic analysis and field review would be conducted, largely 85th percentile based, if not exclusively 85th percentile based. Basically, the 85th percentile is 85% of vehicles are going this speed, and they have to be going 8 or 10 miles an hour over the speed limit in order for this program to be triggered at all. That stage also includes collaborating with police to put out a speed trailer occasionally if it seems like it's warranted. There's also something in there called the Neighborhood Speed Watch program, which we have not implemented in quite some time, just due to equity issues and other issues that might come up. Basically, the Speed Watch program, I guess the city would give residents speed guns, and they would be told, record the speed on your street. So we have not pursued that portion of the policy in quite some time. Based on the speed trailer and any other type of non-physical interventions, there'd be a 6-month evaluation. Phase 2 is, hey, this street meets all of our criteria. The 85th percentile speed is exceeded. We're going to go ahead and implement some traffic calming devices. So an analysis would be conducted by staff, and one chosen out of, I think, the 8 or so that are included in the policy a survey is mailed out to the neighborhood. They get the yes or no from the neighborhood. There's an installation of said device, and then there's an evaluation after 1 year. So today, it's a different world than it was in 2003. We only do really virtual reporting. I haven't received any on paper at all since I started. And therefore, because we're going through our C-Click Fix system, there's no brochures or any extra information that's given out. There's also a lack of resources for speed trailer deployment. I think I successfully got police to give me one speed trailer in the last 2-3 years. And that's just due to lack of ability to justify spending those resources. And finally, since I have taken it over, we haven't made it to phase 2 at all. We've come close a couple of times to that 10 miles an hour over that speed limit, but not quite. Okay, so what are we proposing this evening? So this program would integrate resident and collaborator feedback, industry best practices, meetings with other East Side cities. I've talked to several about their programs, and also based on that 2021 consultant memo. We have broken down the traffic calming measures into basically 2 levels. There's the basic intervention and the full intervention, and then the process is divided into 4 phases: plan initiation, plan development, plan support, and plan implementation. The goal of this update is to improve the livability of neighborhoods by focusing on the safety and comfort of residents and creating a better street environment. The objectives are twofold. First, community collaboration, prioritizing resident voices by providing an equitable and accessible traffic calming request process. And 2, Streets for All users, enhancing the feel of the street environment by considering aesthetics, visual cues, and preferences of the residents along the street or streets and near the intersection or intersection. We do mention this thing called the Traffic Calming Program Process Guidance Document. Could I make that any longer? This is an additional document to be created and adopted administratively to guide the engineering phases of the program. The intent is it can be updated as best practices change over time, and we don't have to come back to council every time that we want to make a little update. This document will include a project management guide, application review process, data collection needs and methods. It will establish threshold requirements, and it'll have that toolbox of traffic calming measures beyond the 8 that we currently. Okay, so the 2 different levels. So level 1, basic intervention. So these are traffic calming measures that affect the physical street environment less and would be implemented at lower costs. Examples of this are targeted speed enforcement. That's the speed trailers I mentioned. I actually put that in phase 2 of it. We can discuss that if you have follow-up questions. Speed trailers, striping, bollards and plastic delineators, radar speed signs, and additional signage. So, run through the basic structure. So, the first step in this is plan initiation section. So, a resident would come, submit a request through the C-Click Fix
Just
portal.
a quick question. Are there
sure.
criteria for level 1 versus level 2 interventions? Or does there's something else that dictates what we do, and what we do kind of dictates what level it is?
That would
I'm not sure which comes first, the speed camera or the intervention.
Yeah. So the answer to that would be first would be guided by that process guidance document, but we also want to give engineers as much flexibility as possible, because traffic calming, while it is a science, it's also an art. Trying to figure out exactly what types of measures fit the specific situation. So the intent of this structure is to give that flexibility of, oh, I think, a level 1 intervention would be enough. We can try that first. If not, oh, this definitely needs a traffic circle or something like that.
Okay, so we're designing I'm playing this back at you. We're designing the intervention based on what we think will be effective, and based on what we think is going to be effective, that makes it either level 1 or level 2, and then the path that it goes forward, which is about where you're about to go, is based on the level 1 or level 2. Great, thank you.
Okay, so I'll go down the path if that's all right. Plan initiation, so that there's that first section, starts with the resident request through the portal, which is the C-Click Fix portal at the moment. Based on that submission, the project would be outlined by staff as they review it, and they would create parameters using an internal traffic calming form, which will be created. It'll be put into a queue of neighborhood requests to be addressed on a first-come, first-served basis. The project can be moved up at the discretion of the traffic or transportation engineering manager based on, hey, we have a grant for X, or this is a really big safety priority, that type of thing. Section 2, or step 2, the plan development. This includes data collection, so we would gather data of neighborhood streets in the study area or spot to determine which intervention, which we were just talking about, would be warranted, and would be guided by that process guidance document. A draft plan would be created using the traffic calming plan template. There would be a stage of soliciting input from local service providers. There's a list of that of those document, but internal collaborators, fire, school district, transit agencies if it's warranted, etc. And then a final draft would be prepared, and we would move on to, in this case, skipping the plan support into level 4 plan implementation. This section is pretty straightforward as far as how we do our projects generally anyway. So the engineering phase would begin, parties would be notified, the construction phase would commence. Temporary devices could be chosen for a certain amount of time at the discretion of engineering staff. And then device monitoring, there'd be data collected after 6 months. And then if the device is deemed effective, then the project would be complete. If results are not satisfactory, it would return to that plan development.
And I have a follow-up question.
Yes.
Where do you make the determination of level 1 intervention versus level 2? It kind of feels like maybe that's done in the plan development part of this, and then that kind of determines where I go from there.
Yeah, I'd probably put it in the two-way data collection phase, especially as that data is gathered. And then you get into the draft plan,
okay.
Then you're kind of,
So
what direction you're going.
The entry point to the process is the same. We're going down the path, and then we get to 2A, as you said, data collection. We make some determinations of which the path forward is, and then that kind of dictates where we go from there.
Right.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah. All right, level 2, the more fun ones. So traffic calming measures, titled full intervention, are measures that heavily affect the built environment and would be implemented at higher costs. These are curb extensions, speed humps, raised intersections and crosswalks, traffic circles, medians, chicanes, concrete, a lot of actual physical intervention. This is, as you said, the chart. It's relatively the same. There would be the request. Staff would put that into the traffic calming form, put it into the queue, go through the data collection, and then at that point we would determine if we want to do a full intervention, putting that into the draft plan, soliciting input, and then going into that final draft. Now, obviously, the biggest difference with level 2 is that plan support piece, which we feel is really important. So during this phase, there would be a neighborhood survey. The survey would be distributed to residences outlined in that traffic calming form. So in that original stage, when in 1B, there would be a map that you would fill out what residences would specifically be affected. And the survey would remain open for 1 month. Neighborhood support, we determined that the most appropriate response rate would be 30% at least. Hard to get engagements. We thought 30%, while it seems low, it's actually pretty reasonable. And that approval rate is best practices 60% to get. From there, once again, we're going into kind of the normal TIP process. It's added to the TIP. It's approved or not, hopefully approved, and then it goes into plan implementation, engineering, construction, device monitoring. So we took this back to TAB in July, as I mentioned, for their feedback. I was able to address a few clarifying questions that had come up in the previous meeting, and then committed to updating the goal statement, which has been updated. The version that you got is the updated version. TAB, their conclusion was they agreed that the concerns from the previous meeting had been addressed, and that the new program aligns with the goals of the MMP, soon to be hopefully called the MIP, the Mobility Implementation Plan. So this evening, once again, we are requesting feedback from the M&I committee on the proposed changes to the neighborhood traffic calming program. The question is should the policy move forward for council adoption? And next steps, next month, we would, if approved, go forward to City Council, and during the last couple of months of the year, we would finalize that internal guidance document and administratively adopt it. I'll go back to this slide and questions at this point.
Questions? Councilmember Hall, you're up.
Sure, thank you. I guess let's start. I have a list of questions. Some of them maybe are just, I'm debating whether or not to ask them, because a lot of this is really like a function of the administration, right? And not necessarily guided by policy from us as council. So I'm trying to think about that. But in terms of, let's start with the TAB. So in the memo, you talked about some of the concerns that they had talked about, and then they were, the way that you framed it seemed like they talked about it quite at length at the TAB meeting, and came to this conclusion that, all right, this does meet our expectations and is aligned with MMP. I wasn't able to go back and watch the meeting, so I was wondering if you could share any more context from that meeting. Was it a challenging discussion, or did they say, oh, this is great, you've captured our concerns?
Oh man, July feels like a long time ago. No, that's okay. I believe that, I don't remember it being contentious. I think they wanted to make sure they were doing a good job and, covering the right bases. I think they walked through, I think we walked through each part pretty specifically to make sure that everything aligned with. Do you have any memories of that? Oh, that's right, yes. There was a lot of discussion about what the threshold should be, specifically that 85th percentile, or is that the 30 and the 60%? Yes, the numbers, the three numbers in the mix. So that the discussion about what does it mean to be 85th percentile? What is what is too high? Is 5 miles an hour 85th percentile too high? Right now it's 10. We don't seem to be getting anything. My answer to that question was basically 5, the universal accepted number for that specific measurement, and then the other numbers, the 30% response rate and the 60%.
Oh, is this what you alluded to in the memo? Like, what is consensus? They were talking about, like, what really is consensus?
Yeah, what is consensus?
Okay. I could see how that would take up a good chunk of a meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. I'm just wondering, this really is a process administrative question, but so it starts with submitting it through See-Click-Fix. So if you're just pointing out people are speeding on the street, is that a request? Or does it have to be, is there a particular button? Like, how does it, I mean, it'll work the way the administration puts it together to work, but are they specifically saying this is a request for this particular program? Or is it that staff are identifying, oh, a number of people had said that there are speeders on the street?
Yeah, the plan that I was going to move forward with, and we've talked about, is currently it comes through, what is it, the neighborhood traffic request or something like that under that category. We would be able to add a category into See-Click-Fix that would be traffic calming request, just to make it super clear that this is a traffic calming request. Obviously, requests sometimes people just throw things in because they couldn't find it. You know, we'll figure out if what's a traffic calming request and what isn't. I think it's usually pretty clear, like, people are speeding too much on my street, and then we look at, is it a residential street or not, and then we move forward from there.
Councilmember Hall, let me just make sure that we've answered your question, because I think what I heard you say is every request then followed through? Or is there some threshold where we say, yeah, thank you very much, and leave it? That's kind of what I heard you ask.
Yeah, and it seems like there's kind of two parts to that based on your answer, that some people will be able to see that you've ingrained the actual function to submit a request, but then there will also be people who don't find that and just say that speeding. So will that part be interpreted collectively as a request, or will it be more we have to wait for an actual request to come through and then there's all this backup of other people who have said something that kind of supports that? I mean, I guess what I really want to say is this is something we should think about, like, because it's never going to work. The interface with the public's never going to work perfect in the way we want it to. So there's several ways to get into the system, but then the traffic engineer to put it in the form.
Yes. Yeah. I think you answered your own question to some degree.
It looks like.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit in that if someone is trying to make a traffic calming request and they grab the wrong category, we'll recategorize it. It's not going to be lost, and it'll be dated from when the original request was made. And if someone does not feel comfortable with See-Click-Fix and comes into the office, we can enter the request into See-Click-Fix. And if someone calls, we can also enter it into See-Click-Fix. So we have a variety of ways to make sure it gets into the system and not lost.
But and I'm sorry to continue on this, but I think there is an administrative decision that is made. You know, if someone writes and says there's speeding on Gilman Boulevard, and this is really awful and the city should stop it, you know, that's not a request for traffic calming. That's not a request. That's a more broad request. If someone says, I live on a particular street and from this cross street to that cross street, I'm concerned, that I think is a more specific request. And so please, staff, correct me if I'm not interpreting this correctly. That is what is acted upon. But there are people who will write in simply to say, why is there so much speeding on Newport Way? You know, what is the city doing to stop that? And they may not say a segment of Newport Way. They may simply say Newport Way. And so we try through See-Click-Fix to sort through that. But if there is something specific, the neighborhood traffic calming projects that we've been working on this summer, for example, each of them have come from some specific request, either multiple requests from residents, and so those rise to a certain level. And so I don't want people to be left the idea that you write into See-Click-Fix, and this elaborate process is launched for every single request, because it is not. But I think we use our best professional judgment to see when there are trends, if there is a location, and then the decisions are made at a staff level to do that. So that, I think, part of the question for the committee with this policy is we really didn't speak to that. I mean, we've simply said if a decision is made to investigate, this is the various ways to investigate, but we really haven't clarified how you kick it off. That I think is what I heard you ask. So the question is, are you satisfied that that really isn't explained? We're just simply saying once it's been determined, then here's the process. Or should there be more finite? I mean, part of it also is staff resources too. You know, we have the staff resources now to deal with this. Over time, you know, those things change, traffic patterns change. And so I think this policy is meant to say there is a process once the determination has been made to investigate. Am I saying all that correctly? I'm saying not. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, well, good. Then I'm glad I think this conversation then has spurred a policy question for the chair and myself to discuss on once we get to the discussion.
And the administration welcomes the feedback from the council. This is not something the administration sees as solely its purview. I mean, this is meant to be a collaborative process. You know, certainly we've been working with the TAB. As the TAB has talked about this, they want very much for it to be a collaborative process. So, you know, we're looking for feedback, and if we need to come back, we're looking to go to the council soon. But if that's something, if they've been hanging out there for a little while, if it needs to hang out a little longer, that's fine too.
Okay. All right, putting a pin in that one for now then.
Great.
For the different interventions for level 1, I wanted to ask, is striping the same thing as all uses of paint on road, or is it just striping along? Because I only bring that up, and I know I've mentioned it in another meeting. I feel like there's a lot of creative and innovative uses of paint in traffic calming. Like, I read about this one scenario where the city just painted the road white, the whole road white, and everyone freaked out and solved the problem. So I just wanted to ask, would all of that be considered in this kind of level 1?
Yes.
Okay.
I personally am a huge proponent of creative ways to use paint. So when I say striping, I mean, paint in general. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Phase 3. What did I mean by this question? Phase 3. I'm wondering if, so phase 3 is, this only happens if we're in need of a physical device for traffic calming. And in part of the memo, it said, so then the solution is identified and then it gets added to the TIP and planned and funded for in the future. It made me think a little bit of the value of having the strategic small capital project bucket that we have. And so I was wondering if we've thought about the value of having flexibility in this space too for kind of smaller device programs where we can act more quickly than moving it into a 6-year plan.
The answer to that question is yes. The original draft of this plan, we've included language like that. Due to the upcoming budget biennium process, we decided to leave that out for now, knowing that we could ask for that very specifically later to be created, basically. Because I love the idea of having, a traffic calming mini bucket, but it does not exist. Well, it sort of exists right now, but
well, and maybe in the future, if we find ourselves able to, from a budget perspective, to have a separate bucket for that would make sense. But for right now, would the strategic small capital bucket apply to these kinds of projects, or is that reserved?
Yes, and one of the things I thought would be good for a future committee discussion is talking about what to prioritize with the strategic small capital project.
I would love that conversation. That sounds great. Okay, cool. So we're thinking about it. Good. And then, so the guidance document, the really long document name that you talked about, I mean, that's definitely mostly an administrative document, but really quick. One of the things I noticed in there that it said it was only, so this kind of program would only be eligible for local access streets. Is that all just neighborhood streets, or was it like that in the previous, or in the current policy? Is it just local access streets? Is that a change?
Yeah, so that's one piece that we've gone back and forth on a little bit over time, whether to leave it as just those residential streets, because some streets in neighborhoods are actually collectors. we decided to keep it just to the request process just to residential streets, and then allowing collectors or other types of streets to be basically administratively identified.
Oh,
taken
okay. I'm
action.
glad I asked this. So when you said collectors would be eligible for traffic calming at the direction of the city engineer, collectors, we mean that as a type of street collectors.
Yes.
Okay, I was like,
Yes.
trash collectors? Like, what is? Okay, understood. Thank you. That definitely clears up the next question. Okay, so for this, focused on those local streets.
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe this is another question for us to have a policy conversation about too, but I don't know how I think about the thresholds conversation that you were talking about. It was kind of framed in the policy proposal part as, the city has limited resources, and so we have to have these particular thresholds, but they'll be kind of administratively driven. It seems to me like that could be a policy question as to what thresholds we're looking at and what kinds of thresholds we're looking at. The daily traffic, average daily traffic, 85th percentile speeds, level of service, and pedestrian counts. Those were some of the examples you had. But I could also see how that was kind of the point of like the problem and the source of frustration with the community in the current policy with the 85th, and we can't deviate. So what does the administration think about whether or not we should have more policy discussions at the council level about what thresholds to set for traffic calming?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take an attempt at this one. We wanted to have the thresholds be driven by data, and knowing that things are changing, cars keep getting bigger, they keep getting taller, they keep getting heavier as we get more electric vehicles. And so what we're really looking at is the likelihood of a fatality at a speed. And there's data right now that says at certain speeds you're more likely to have a fatality if a pedestrian were to be hit by a car. But we wanted to leave it open rather than codified, because we expect that there could be new data in the future that changes the speed when a fatality is likely to occur.
And that could be changing
Yes.
every year very quickly. Okay, I buy that. I understand. That is all my.
Great, thanks. I'm so much easier. What are bollards?
This question actually came up in tab because I also described everything as bollards, and I realized that I was thinking about plastic delineators, those plastic ones. When I was in graduate school, we referred to everything as bollards, and that just stuck in my head. So by bollards, I mean those plastic delineators specifically.
So temporary structures versus, I just remember when Costco got broken into and they put bollards in front of them, and they were big old nasty permanent things.
They are.
And
yes.
that was sort of a physical thing, and that's why I was kind of like, it didn't quite fit with me. So,
Yes.
but you were talking about something that's lightweight, temporary, and just kind of it creates a visual stimulus.
Yeah, primarily. I mean, I guess I could see some case where, about like a actual bollard might be better in some spot. But I did notice when I was going through this presentation today, like, bollard's still in there. Cool.
Okay. All right. Cool. And then signage, were these temporary signs or permanent signs? We're thinking.
Permanent. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the speed trailers, those are the wheel them in. They sit there for 6 weeks, wheel them away. Not the permanent speed cameras.
I would love to have them for 6 weeks.
Okay.
That's also an issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
For instance, 6 weeks. Okay. Great. That was really the only questions I have. I think this is very interesting approach to kind of segmenting the work where there's, heavy investment has one path and light investment has another path, and that makes sense. So any other questions from you, Councilmember Hall? Then I will turn to the city clerk and ask if there is anybody online who is interested in making public comment at this time.
Chair, there's no one online for public comment.
Okay, then we're going to move into deliberations, and thank you for teeing it up, but I think there was a couple of issues that we kind of flagged as things we wanted to to talk about. And so one was kind of some of the policy questions around thresholds for making changes, and then also, and I think that's kind of what goes in and how it gets triage. So, Councilmember Hall, what are your thoughts?
Well, one of them's easy, the thresholds bit. I definitely take staff's comments there to heart. I think it makes sense to be flexible there. I mean, that seems like that was part of the problem with the existing policy, and also with the innovation of kind of modes of transportation happening so quickly these days. It probably makes sense to keep that flexible for staff and not have policy written in stone by council. So I buy that. As for kind of when the process starts, I don't know. I'm curious what you think about this, but I think having the request system within I can't say it either. C-Click-Fix is good, but I think also we can't say that everything that comes through is a request, because that's also a draw on staff time and resources. But I would think there's got to be some way of, when a similar kind of comment is flagged in C-Click-Fix that isn't a request, up to a certain threshold is just the word of the evening, that we try to make an engagement with the community. And maybe it's not like we reach out to someone to say, hey, do you want to make this official request? But have some sort of communication with the community to say, we've gotten a lot of comments in C-Click-Fix around this particular situation. Like, is this a request that you want to make officially through the city? I'd be curious what the administration's thoughts are on that, because it would commit city resources to, at a certain point, reach out to the community, and to whom they would be reaching out. It would also be unclear in my. That's what I thought. That was my thought, but I'm curious what Chair Ray thinks. Maybe first.
No, let me kind of opine on that one, because I kind of see this as more. I like the linear layout of this, but it's really not. I think it feels more like a funnel to me, where we got a bunch of things going in the top of the funnel, and then we are applying some criteria to them. We are aggregating them. We are looking at the patterns that emerge, and then we're applying our best judgment into which ones of these move forward. So you may have a lot of C-Click-Fix input, or people coming into the office, or phone call, but ultimately maybe it's not a single event. It may be a single event, but maybe it doesn't have to be there's not a one-to-one correspondence between moving forward with a traffic calming thing and a request. So I think where I would like to see the process kind of evolve is to say, how do we aggregate these things? What's the process for periodically looking at the requests, so you're not just being stimulus response driven? I get something, I react. I get something, I react. You're actually kind of gathering stuff, looking for patterns and trends, and then saying, oh, well, we've got some issues around, I can't even think of a street name, Dogwood, right now, and we need to take some action in this area. And then we start to go into the next stage, which is, okay, given this road, given this engineering, given these parameters, what do we think is the best thing? And then we pick up with level 1, level 2. The other thing I was thinking about that you kind of triggered for me, Councilmember Hall, is that there's also a kind of a feasibility cost-benefit thing that goes on here too. And I don't necessarily see that in the linear model, where the right thing to do is this, but it's awfully expensive to do that, particularly at that location. And is that intervention worth the value that we're going to get from it? So somewhere where we're actually making a determination on cost effectiveness of the intervention. So it may be effective, but it may not. So that was the other thing that I thought was kind of missing from the model. First was the, how do I aggregate and select? You know, that's the determination of what I'm going to move forward with. I love your idea of how do I provide feedback. So if there's like an automated feedback way within the C-Click-Fix, then we can, kind of do that in real time. And then ultimately, I really want to put in a speed hump here, but that's going to be really expensive, so maybe I'm just going to do striping. That cost, what's the most cost-effective way to? So those are my kind of thoughts. Zach, what else you got?
Well, I'm just kind of curious what staff are thinking about what we're saying, because I saw your mic come on right after.
So the couple things I just heard, the first one I did want to say is when we get the requests in See-Click-Fix, it is really easy to do the first step, which is to collect the speed data. And that's something, no matter how short-staffed we've been able to keep up with collecting data. So I'm not concerned about getting it into the system when we get it to from See-Click-Fix. It's really easy to send someone out, set up the data collection device, and collect the data. And then cost effectiveness, I think that's a great thing to bring up. That is something that we considered. In fact, it's probably so much part of the process we didn't even think to address it. But I'm kind of chewing on how to best incorporate that. But that is absolutely something that we have to consider, because in the end, if we can't afford the improvement, then it doesn't matter if we come up with the greatest idea in the world. We need something that we can actually implement.
Yeah, it's almost like just kind of the way you operate. So it's like a fish with water. You don't know, you don't even think about it because it's just the way you do it. What else you got, sir?
Yeah, and interestingly, I think like the adding of it to the CIP is in itself a cost-benefit kind of analysis, because you're pulling it into the budget if you can afford it in that given biennium. But at the same time, if data is saying you need a speed hump because of life safety and you can't afford it, you're not even doing any of the level 1 interventions at that point. You're waiting on. Is that correct? Would you go straight to level 2, or even for these where you're getting data that say we need a level 2, you would do level 1 first while you wait? How does it work?
It could go either way. I think it would depend on the situation.
Yeah.
Where I could see a hypothetical where maybe you'd want to go straight to level 2 might be a situation where you have really high speeds and lots of pedestrians crossing at uncontrolled marked crosswalks. That's the one where I'd say, okay, we got to go straight to level 2. But under most situations, I think we'd want to go with level 1 for several reasons. One, it would allow us to do more, and 2, level 1 is things that we can easily remove. So if we try something and the community hates it or it's not working, then we're not stuck with something that would be here for the next 20 years.
I think that you are absolutely headed in the right direction. There's a couple things I would just call out. One is the funnel, the other is the cost benefit. I also think coming back after we get through this current budget cycle with saying we're going to carve out a traffic calming budget, I think would be really an interesting way to do it, because I think budgeting a certain amount of resource for traffic calming is a way to say, how do I get the most impact for a finite amount of resource, and drive some scarcity drives some interesting behaviors, but it also gives you flexibility as opposed to saying, well, I can't do anything, I'm just going to put it in the CIP, and 5 years from now maybe it'll get done, and that's not responsive, and it's not good public policy either. So I like that idea a ton. But I mean, I really like the model, and I think it's smart, because when I first read it, I was like, well, how come these guys don't get the plan support part of it? It's like, then you kind of look at it and say, well, because it's temporary and it's low impact and it's low cost, and it's really not worth the squeeze. But the things that are really going to have an impact on the neighborhood, I think this plan support column makes a ton of sense. So with just a couple of things to clarify, I think I think this is great, and I think having the very long named document, the Traffic Calming Program Process Guidance document, will also be helpful from just a simply how do I administer the program. So I'm pretty supportive of where you guys are going. Councilmember Hall?
Yeah, and for the good, I completely agree. It does a lot of things like you talked about kind of night. It's definitely more administrative, so it allows us to revisit it over time and for staff to make changes as things innovate and change. It addresses the gaps and a lot of the outdated policies in the current policy, like having resident volunteers. I read that and my mouth dropped. That was crazy. Definitely a larger voice of the community that's evident through the policy, and then also recognizing that it's not an exact science, so wanting to give staff the flexibility there made sense to me. I think the goal and the key objectives are well thought out and aligned with our transportation visioning, no matter what document it's in. I think, yeah, a lot of the same things that are on my mind that you said. I think we need potentially a path for quicker level 2 solutions similar to the strategic small capital bucket, whether we just use that and we have that conversation about prioritization, or in the future we have a conversation about having a new bucket, whichever. So I just want to make sure that's on our mind as we move forward. The funnel obviously too, and keeping in mind how people are requesting through see, click, fix. I think it's fine to use best professional judgment on this for right now. My thought for some of these questions that we're still thinking about and we still need to evaluate as this policy goes through is, let's build in like a touchback with council in 2 years or something like that, where we can say this is how it's been going so far. People have been requesting it in the way that we thought, or people aren't requesting it in the way we thought, and it's causing challenges and we need to rethink it. I just throw out 2 years, but whenever you think is an appropriate timeline to come back to council, I just said that because then it's right before the next budget. But maybe we build in some sort of evaluative period for this committee again. Otherwise, I think great work. Definitely modern and better than the 2003 policy, and appreciate your efforts on it.
All right. You have what you need to kind of go forward, and we are supportive of bringing it back to full council, right? Consent? Or do you want to do it on regular business? It doesn't really have a financial impact. We'll do a committee report, but let's bring it back on consent. Awesome. Thank you, John. Thank you, John. Thank you, Emily. And any announcements, Councilmember Hall? All right, then we are through with the agenda, and it is 7:25, and we're adjourned.